welcome back to the channel. I wanted to talk about it because in the news, we're talking about Palpatine's contingency plan. There's been a recent write-up on StarWars.com. I've been screaming about this thing for the past 4 years, but we're going to dive deep into it right now on the high ground. All right, everybody. Hello and welcome. I have my esteemed guests on the other side. It's Mirrored. I always have trouble with that. But I got Element 7 here, and we're going to dive deep into this contingency plan with Palpatine. Say hello.
Hello, everyone. This is a very, very huge topic. As Chaco said, we've been talking about this for the last 4 years. Every time someone says that it doesn't make sense that Palpatine returned, we point back to the Aftermath novels and just, how much he's been planning for this. And granted, a lot of it wasn't seated in the sequel movies themselves. And I will grant that you would have needed to play Battlefield and read the Aftermath novels, but we have been telling people, at least they were answering this question a lot, about the contingency and why it makes sense for Palpatine to return. That's what we're here to do.
But there was no plan. What are you talking about? No, it always kind of makes me chuckle, but I get it. Like you said, there's a lot more that could have been in the movies, but being someone playing all the games and reading all the books and stuff like that, the breadcrumbs were there. They have been there all along. I gotta ask, because even with the breadcrumbs, we didn't have confirmation, which was obviously intentional. When did you first think that Palpatine was coming back, or at least when you found out? What did your mind go to of oh, this is why?
After The Force Awakens. So after The Force Awakens, I started theorizing about Rey Kenobi. There was a lot of theories out there about Rey Palpatine. And then I read The Force Awakens novelization and saw that one line where she's about to end Kylo, or at least try to. And then the amorphous voice that says, "Kill him." And you're like, that's not anyone else. It's not Yoda. That's not Dooku. The only person that has said that line, "Kill him." That's Palpatine.
Absolutely. It's funny because our dad remains strong. For me, because I'm listening to that audiobook of the novelization of The Force Awakens, and Mark Thompson reads it in Palpatine's voice too. And I was like, oh, so it's Palpatine, right?
Yeah.
No, we're not gonna talk about that, but no, and there's there's plenty of other clues, but again, it was poorly done in the films. That being said, there's a lot that you can't ignore,
Yeah.
It wasn't done well, but it was done.
Yeah, that was the moment that I thought of Palpatine, but actually after that moment, I started to think, naturally, narratively, it was him. If you think about it, if you think about the Infinity Saga and it was Thanos this whole time, then you think about Palpatine. You can't have a saga. And I said this in my videos back then. You can't have a saga where the big bad for the first 6 is there. He's the one doing everything, and then the last 3 is just a rando jobber who's like, I'm a dark side user. I'm the big bad. I started thinking, no, it's been Palpatine all along. It's Agatha,
There's only one way you can do that, and that's if it's I'm the big bad's brother, and you
get a Hobbs and Shaw.
That's that's a common trope. I used to watch the show 24 until all the villains started being related to Kiefer Sutherland.
Well, actually, there was another one that
I can't do this.
There was another one that popped up that I was a huge fan of that would have made more sense than Palpatine, which would have been Plagueis. Like Plagueis played Palpatine. But then again, that would have been like, it would have made narrative sense, but at the same time, my view of Palpatine was always, nah, he was the master. He manipulated his master and manipulated Anakin, almost manipulated Luke. So everyone's under his thumb.
That kind of leads me to another thing that I don't know if it's a problem or a good thing, but I feel like a lot of the people in charge of making the sequel trilogy were huge fans of the expanded universe. And I think that like the Plagueis book and especially the Bane trilogy informed a lot of things that went into this. And so there
Dark Empire.
And yeah, Dark Empire for sure. But there's like so many like notes and things that I don't know, and it's fascinating how it goes back and forth between. I thought this was canon all along, and like, well, we're making it canon now, but we haven't seen this before in the movies. You're like, but you can't. But you just, what do you want? Type of deal. But yeah, let's jump into the article, and we'll kind of didn't mean to. Well, let's jump into the article and just kind of take a look and see what nuggets we can suss out here. Beautiful shot of our guy here being decrepit and blind. One question I get a lot is, why didn't Palpatine come back right away? You're like, because look at him. What's he?
Can you put like a clip of Han saying, "That's not how the Force works"? I mean, he couldn't.
He's attached to the Omen harness. He's not quite mobile yet.
Yeah.
All of the attempts for him to make a new body have failed. And even so, even if he did, if let's say he went back to the Empire, do you think he would be able to reclaim the throne? Not unless everyone is loyal to him. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
But we'll get into that, right? Star Wars Inside Intel is a StarWars.com feature where Lucasfilm story member Emily Shukukian. I'm sorry, Emily.
I'm gonna say Eshkukani.
Sure. Whose job is to know as much about a galaxy far, far away as possible, explores obscure facts about Star Wars lore and continuity. In this installment, Emily connects the dots of Palpatine's contingency plan.
That's a good choice of words. Obscure. Because it is.
Very much so. Although Poe Dameron might not have understood how Palpatine returned in Star Wars Rise of Skywalker and was understandably exasperated at the news, it was all part of the contingency plan, a plan that anticipated Palpatine's death and prepared for his return to power. I like how they acknowledge the elephant in the room.
Somehow, Palpatine's returned.
I just love the meme of the butterfly of like Palpatine returning, and it's somehow. Palpatine was a talented manipulator, from killing his own Sith master to creating conflicts and conspiracies within the Republic Senate to orchestrating a galaxy-wide war, taking power as the Emperor. As a Sith Lord, Palpatine craved power but feared losing it. This compelled him to design a backup plan, officially known as the Contingency. He's great at naming stuff. That feels super George Lucas. In the event that he
died.
Operation
in the event that I die.
yeah, exactly. Codename Deus Ex Machina. Palpatine's plot would go into effect. So just real quick in this, it's obvious that the guy that orchestrated the Clone Wars, played both sides politically to a T, was manipulating corporations, politicians, government, and the people, and the Jedi. Do you think he would just stop planning ahead? When would he stop planning ahead?
you know, he did all of this and got himself elected as Supreme Chancellor. You know how many people run political campaigns and can only do that? But now he's like, he's manipulating the Trade Federation. He's manipulating the Republic. He's manipulating the Jedi. He's even manipulating his own apprentice as well. Apprentices, realistically. But like...
Are you saying that Palpatine's a Mary Sue? Listen, I have not seen any evidence that he knows how to manipulate people beforehand. Did he just start doing it?
I don't know. Is there a manipulation 101 in college right now? He's just a genius, to be completely honest with you.
I love Palpatine so much.
Yeah.
I really do. I know he seems like mustache twirly evil, but he does it the best. You know what I mean? Like, you can't mess with the class. It's like saying, tacos are boring. Like, but they're delicious.
Yes, absolutely.
And then we got this beautiful shot.
But they're far from
here.
boring.
True. Beautiful shot of our boy here. Originally introduced in Claudia Gray's Star Wars Lost Stars as a concept, the contingency itself began in Chuck Wendig's Aftermath trilogy. After Emperor Palpatine was unexpectedly betrayed and killed by Darth Vader, and word of his death, along with the destruction of the second Death Star, traveled across the Empire, the contingency unfolded as planned. Sentinel droids were dispatched to Imperials throughout the galaxy and advised them on next steps, starting, with Operation Cinder.
Yeah. There's no plan whatsoever.
So all of this and all of these, actually, I believe chronologically, the very first mention of this is actually not mentioned here. The first mention is in the comic that Shattered Empire, the one that started with Shara Bay.
Oh.
That's the first place, Operation Cinder and plan. But I don't think they exactly when that was.
I don't think they named the contingency. I think they named the operation though.
Okay, that's fair. But
like, as they mentioned, even as far back as Lost Stars and the Aftermath novels, which is 2014, as far back as that,
it's before The Force Awakens. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There was no plan. Anyways, Operation Cinder sought to destroy Imperial and the New Republic planets alike, with the goal to destroy sensitive information or other liabilities. The operation was carried out in various ways, including the use of climate disruption arrays, which, once fired upon a planet, would create catastrophic weather conditions, vortex detonators, a custom explosive that made the planet of Necronus uninhabitable, and the Imperial Navy, who engaged in battles on planets that attempted to resist the operation, such as Naboo, Bernard Khan, as mentioned in The Mandalorians, Abednego, and more. Operation Cinder was devastating, but it also solidified many allegiances to the newly erected New Republic and saw many Imperials defect due to the brutality of the operation. And so that's kind of where I wanted to dive in. Why the hell would Palpatine want that to happen? What do you think?
Well, you know, given the contingency is in the event of his death, he basically wanted to punish everyone for failing to protect him. He was the ultimate emperor. You know, he was the only one that was destined to rule the empire, to rule the galaxy. And as this article, points out earlier, he is obsessed with power and fears losing it. And he doesn't want anybody around after him. You know, he obviously has plans, for the most part, with the contingency for the rebuilding of the empire in the unknown regions. And with that comes his essence transfer and all that good stuff. But the Operation Cinder was primarily, to create such an aftermath you know, that
I see what you did there. I
both both sides of the chessboard saw massive damage, like crippling damage across the board, and that's why it led to a lot of defectors, because it was very indiscriminate. A lot of Operation Cinder was taken or was enacted by only the closest, and I believe, I forget the name of it, or the Imperial Council to the Emperor. Only those that were very much, in the know were part of this operation.
Yeah, it actually. So, because there was one thing that I have read that you haven't quite gotten to yet.
Mm-hmm. Alphabet Squadron?
Yes.
Okay. I have to.
They eventually find out what prompted these Emperor droids to seek out what people. Because that was the big question, is how do they know who to ask to carry these out? Because everyone that they asked carried out these missions, but not everyone in the Empire is that evil or messed up or whatever. Yeah, that answer gets it gets answered, but it's.
Feel free to go into it. I am going to read it, but those types of books, I'm like, it doesn't hurt to know.
Well, well, I mean, just like this article says, there's multiple things that Operation Cinder was doing, and that it's instilling fear across the galaxy. It is crippling the Empire, but it's also destroying key locations. So, like, remember Jakku? Jakku had one of the Emperor's observatories.
Yeah.
Just like Pilio, which is what Del Meeko was sent to destroy. Part of it was also destroying anything that could link or send anyone from the Empire to find out what his plans are. And then, of course, there's, taking down the Empire itself, because, like you mentioned, the chessboard, but that was a big part of Aftermath with, Gallius Rax. Of course, it was space chess or whatever, but he asked him, like, how come when the king dies, you don't keep playing? You reset the board. Well, it's because if the king dies, that means that they were unable to protect their king, and so they don't deserve to live. And you're like, "Whew, that's a cold man right there." But on top of all of that, we have. It just makes sense, because if Palpatine died and had a contingency plan to come back, like I was saying at the beginning, it's not like you would show up and everyone would be like, "Oh, the Emperor's back. We'll give him all the stuff." No, they would have. The people are power hungry. They have their own desires. They would have ripped the Empire apart, cornered out pieces of it. It would have been like, ancient Greece being carved up by Alexander the Great's 4 generals type of deal. Which is
power vacuums always do that.
Yeah, and that's exactly what the Aftermath book was all about. They bring in all of these top level people, and some of them are only interested in money. Some of them were only interested in military might. Some of them were only interested in the dark side. And it was only Rey Sloane that was still loyal to Palpatine, and so she was the only one that was deemed worthy to go on out into the outer reaches in order to. At the time of reading the book, we don't know. But it was found the First Order and do all of this stuff.
I like how they mentioned Burnin Khan here from The Mandalorian, because we do get to see kind of the ramifications of Operation Cinder in Mayfeld. As you mentioned, these select few who are enacting this operation are all there to do this, unquestionably. And Mayfeld is part of the foot soldiers that are like, this doesn't make sense at all. And so there's a lot of resentment from the lower ranks, the rank and file. And we get to see him. He's just like, that really messed me up. And he just shot him. He shot his.
Yeah, and that's why we have and it's hard. It's hard to read at first. I get that. I felt this, but Alphabet Squadron, like we get Trader's Remorse. This is the main defecting camp for Imperials, and then like the sooner you defected, the more people respect you, because it means like, oh, you didn't do all this stuff. But there's also these people that were just lost in the war of like, we've done so much, we can't turn back now. Like they'll kill us, and so we have to try to protect what we have. And it's this weird interplay where they've switched sides and they're led by a major who doesn't care for hates the Empire, but is like, I care about these people and the souls of these people, and they just want to fight, and so I'm going to give them something to fight. It gets surprisingly good.
Jesus.
By the way, is Burning Con, is that Space Boston? I don't know.
Burning Can.
One major element of the contingency was about a year after the Emperor's death at the Battle of Jakku, led by the self-appointed counselor to the Empire, Gallius Rax. I wouldn't necessarily call him self-appointed.
Yeah, Palpatine says, I'm sure.
Yeah, he was trained by Palpatine directly from childhood. Anyways, he brought the remainder of the Empire to Jakku in a last stand against the New Republic. The majority of the Imperials involved in the battle believed they would retake the galaxy with a victory, but the contingency planned for this to be the conclusion to the Empire. Rex was originally supposed to have the entire plan of Jakku destroyed, along with the Imperials, as further punishment for failing Palpatine. What was accounted for in his plan was Grand Admiral Sloane. Grand Admiral Sloane is a boss-ass character. Read this book. Read A New Dawn. You get to see her as like a new, getting her first ranks up. She's a really interesting character. I like her a lot. An underling of Gallius Rax, Sloane was kept in the dark about the contingency and Rax's involvement. As such, Sloane began to believe that Rax was deviating the Empire from its intended glory. On Jakku, Sloane confronted Rax where she shot and killed him. In his final moments, Rax appointed Sloane to the contingency and urged her to retreat to the unknown regions with Brendel Hux, Armitage's father, and we met Brendel in Rebels, to create a new and better empire. With Rax dead, and thanks to Sloane, Jakku was saved. Rex's plan to completely destroy the Empire did not unfold, with remnants of the Empire continuing for years following the official end of the war. Sloane would heed Rax's final demands and head for the unknown regions.
Yeah.
So I still fully believe, though, that Giancarlo Esposito's faction is working directly for Palpatine, and I think that's evidence in the show. But there are certainly still factions out there, and part of that is touched upon in Alphabet Squadron again. But I want more of those books. And granted, there may be more information in Star Wars Squadrons. I didn't finish the storyline. I plan to.
There's that whole story about Versio, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
absolutely.
Didn't finish it either.
Let's see here. For many years prior to his demise, Palpatine sought immortality on the Sith planet of Exegol. It was on this planet that he and his cultists, known as the Sith Eternal, experimented with cloning. Exegol was also where Palpatine built his Final Order fleet. As an immortal Sith, Palpatine would reign supreme over the galaxy with the Sith Armada. This would be the grand finale of the contingency, known only to a select few. When Palpatine was killed on the second Death Star, his consciousness transferred to a clone of his own body on Exegol, but the body was too weak to contain him. This led Palpatine creating more clones and strandcasts of himself in the hopes that one would offer a more suitable vessel for him to inhabit. All this effort ultimately culminated in Rey, the daughter of one of Palpatine's strandcasts. she was the perfect vessel, but her father and mother did everything they could to hide her from her sinister grandfather.
Yeah, story on that. The romance data pad about the Strandcast and that one woman who was like, I want that.
You know what? We need to find pictures of what's his name? Palpatine's actor while young for like some sort of reference point. You know what I mean? Of like, was he hot at some point?
I'm trying to catch a gnat that's flying around. I am listening to you, but I'm like,
well, so why would we believe that Palpatine sought immortality?
Oh gosh,
I'm sorry, that was too obvious. I get that question asked. Like,
yes,
what evidence do we have that would support that? I don't know. His promise to Anakin, his master Plagueis.
That's the only thing you need. That's the only context you need, really. If you're one of those guys like we shouldn't need external media, then just go to the Revenge of the Sith, and he's like talking about Plagueis cheating death, and then he's like, maybe we can, like, he says that after Anakin turns to him, he's like, together we will succeed where my master failed. We will find a way. And you know, it makes sense that it's the ultimate continuation of his master's work. We wanted to cheat death. And Palpatine is the one who loves power, fears losing it. How is he going to prevent himself from losing it? Immortality. He doesn't want anything else. He's like, all the credits in the world. No.
and I think though his goal itself wasn't immortality. Like, his goal was to rule the galaxy for as long as possible, and then obviously immortality is a part of that. That's like one of the main ingredients to this horrifying Sith meal. But yeah, it's just
thinking about him reading the recipe to ruling the galaxy forever. Immortality.
I
don't have that. I need to go to Ralph's.
Pretty much. But it also makes sense in that other part where he wanted to make a better empire. So if you were planning to come back, he doesn't want to fight the empire. He's going to scuttle it because he wants the galaxy to be ununited, to be something that he can come back and take over with ease. If the empire continued without him, it's possible that it would be more difficult for him to come. He can't just waltz back in and be like, yeah, I rule now. No, he would have been replaced. And so it makes sense that he would want to create a more powerful Sith empire.
Yeah, I mean, that was part and parcel of what Operation Cinder was. It was to deal a crippling blow, or, you know, best case scenario, a devastating and destructive blow to the Empire and the New Republic. And then when we go on to Bloodline, and we see how the New Republic has been handling themselves, you're like, man.
They've been focusing on peace. They demilitarized. Yeah.
And then they have all of these people who are like closeted Empire sympathizers, and you're not like arresting them. You're just like, oh, that kind of hobby. That makes sense. You know, you see how the First Order proliferates in Bloodline. If you ever have that question, read Bloodline.
Bloodline is like a scathing political like.
Oh yeah, it's a indictment of the New Republic for sure.
Of modern day America, but
yeah,
but also the New Republic. Any thoughts on the on Palpatine trying to create clone bodies and being unable to create a good enough vessel? I mean, when you said the vessel, I automatically just think of Boruto. But
so I think it makes sense completely. Like, when he's talking to Anakin about his master Plagueis cheating death, he talks about, manipulating the midichlorians to create life. And part of Palpatine's rise with the Empire is using clones and synthetic life. And given that he has that technology at his disposal, and then we see a lot of evidence in the Bad Batch and the Mandalorian that he was at least playing with the notion that he could alter the clones, or at least make it so that he could hold himself in one of them. It completely makes sense. Just the immortality, the want for it, wanting to cheat death, thanks to his master, and then having the technology of the clones, the backdrop of the clone army and the Camino scientists. Like in the Bad Batch, spoiler alert for the latest episode, they didn't kill Nala Se. They took her because she was the mastermind, or at least the lead scientist behind enhanced clones. And so what they want her to do, assumedly, is to help Palpatine create clones that could house Force sensitivity. I'm glad that Omega. I'm presuming again. I'm glad that Omega isn't Force sensitive, because that would create a huge wrinkle in the Force sensitivity cloning dilemma. So I'm glad that Palpatine wasn't able to create a clone that could contain him. And the one that could, at least to some degree, was Snoke, which was a Strandcast. And we are at the precipice of figuring out how he did that with, like, the transfusion of maybe Grogu's blood or M cells or whatever. It wasn't like a 1-to-1 clone. So
yeah, exactly. And that's why Snoke looks like a ball sack. Let's see here. Destiny and the Contingency would catch up to Rey in the form of the First Order, led by one of Palpatine's evil duplicates called Snoke. Dang, that's a sentence. I'll finish the paragraph, though. Although Snoke was unsuccessful in bringing Rey to Palpatine and was unexpectedly killed by his protege, Kylo Ren, Palpatine continued to pull the strings in order to reel his granddaughter so he could finally achieve ultimate power.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, Snoke wasn't being controlled, so to speak, but no. In all of the write-ups, like from the Star Wars book and the visual dictionaries and reference material, Snoke is explained as being subconsciously subservient to Palpatine. So he doesn't he's like one of those dudes that like thinks that his agenda is wholly his own, but in the back of his mind, it's all been like perpetrated by someone else. And so like subconsciously he's enacting Palpatine's agenda, but he totally thinks he's the badass in the chair.
Yeah. Like people in our comment sections who are just quoting YouTube videos, but like without any thought of anything themselves.
Oh, well, yeah. I got my thoughts on my own. Also, bad writing, no character development, Mary Sue.
Yeah.
You know how that is true about, how you cannot get that thought on your own? I hadn't heard the term Mary Sue until The Force Awakens. From those videos. I really didn't. I hadn't heard that term. I was like, what is a Mary Sue? Like, I didn't know. As much as I read, I've never heard the term. And these people are like, I got this thought on my own. She's a Mary Sue.
Also the phrase, which is the phrase that is not untrue to itself, but Finn got done dirty. Like that sentence string.
Yes, they did Finn dirty.
Who else got done dirty? Like, and it caught on like wildfire.
Or the other one, Finn should have been the main character.
That one just makes me uncomfortable in general. But that's yeah. With the Final Order operational, it slowly deployed from Exegol and pledged to destroy planet after planet. The Resistance worked quickly to counter this new threat. Rey accepted her role as a Jedi and rebel and arrived on Exegol to bring a conclusion to the conflict. Palpatine planned for Rey to partake in a ritual which would allow him to inhabit her body and live forever. But Rey had other plans. With the help of Ben Solo and Jedi Past, Rey took her final steps and defeated the Phantom Menace once and for all.
Yes. And might I just point to that Phantom Menace line again. As much as I've shown people the Star Wars book with Palpatine's page saying the Phantom Menace, people are like, the Phantom Menace was Maul. Like, no. Like Palpatine was the one behind the curtain.
Do you know what a Phantom is?
Yes. And I think that's the first time we're actually going to canonically get a confirmation as to the point of the ritual, because I don't think in the novelization it doesn't necessarily
implied, but it doesn't say it.
Yeah, it doesn't say he wants to take over her body, but it implies that that's going to be the case, and that he offers the same thing to Luke, and Vader saved Luke from that, which completely changes Return of the Jedi in retrospect. But thinking about that, I was like, I think this line like explicitly confirms that was the point of the ritual, was so that he could take her as a vessel.
Yeah.
Which is good, because a lot of people miss implications, nuance.
But it was such a, this was directly ripped out of the Darth Bane books. I mean, in the third Bane book, he was experimenting with trying to get cloned bodies to try and use those to take over, and it never worked. And then he was going to try it with Xana, and at the end of the book, they tried to leave it ambiguous as to who it was. We all know it was Xana that won, but still,
it fascinates me how much of EU concepts make it to canon, and people are like criticizing canon in favor of Legends for the same things that happen in Legends, like Palpatine returning, like what you just mentioned, that connective tissue, the dyad being based on the Force bond, and the Force bond wasn't like really a big thing until like, you know, the EU with Revan and Bastila, but yeah. It's based on that.
And then again with
Mitra and Kreia.
Mitra and Kreia, yeah.
And then the people are saying, oh, they just made up the dyad to fill in the plot hole of like the first two movies. Like, no. The Force bond's been there since forever. It's a beefed up, you know, mythic version of the Force bond, but
you can't force heal. Like, bruh, you healed your whole team with Yoda on Battlefront 2 yesterday. I saw.
Yeah,
but it's never been a new concept at all.
You force healed KOTOR.
All of the time, I ran an all Force user team, so that I can every third act was someone doing a heal for my team, and so everyone was just constantly topped off. Yeah, it was a good plan, you know, constantly healing and laying lots and lots and lots of bombs and just kiting people through the bombs.
Yeah,
I'd
be surprised how many. You'd be surprised how many people point to that strategy as the de facto strategy.
Oh, really?
Mines. Mine's in force stasis and force healing.
Well, now I don't feel alone, so thank you.
And now I expose myself for looking up strategies on KOTOR.
No worries. It is what it is. But yeah, I mean,
let's answer this question.
What do you think about that? Go ahead.
Let's answer this question. Did you learn something new about the contingency?
No.
No, but I'm pretty sure if you have so many questions about why Palpatine returned, how he could return, read this article. Or if you are even more curious about it, read Aftermath, read Lost Stars, read Alphabet Squadron. I'm going to read that. It's so hard. There's so many books coming out, so many things I need to... I mean, Tempest Runner coming out, Edge of Balance.
Monster at Temple Peak is next week.
And, gosh, I'm trying to find some time in between to read all these books. But yeah. Alphabet Squadron, the Aftermath trilogy. It is really a hard read to get through Aftermath, but there are some good nuggets in there, especially about this subject.
So I will say this straight up: first book, hard to read, but you will love Mr. Bones. You will want to die for Mr. Bones. Books 2 and 3 are a lot easier to read. It was just a style that the author tried. I don't think it worked super well, but it stopped. So, I think you got the feedback you needed. All right. So what about that line that said that Snoke was a duplicate? Snoke is one of Palpatine's evil duplicates.
It means exactly what it says, a duplicate, right? So, like, if it were a clone, they would have said clone. A duplicate is not the same. It's a dupe, You make duplicates all the time in Photoshop. That's not the same thing. If it were the same thing, you would have to select it, and then moving one would move the other. But that's just in computer terms. But a duplicate or a dupe is just simply something that originated from the other.
Yeah.
So you duplicated, some of Palpatine's genes interspliced with other body parts, and you created a strand cast called Snoke. It's a duplicate. It originated from Palpatine, but I'm pretty sure the Force sensitivity was transfused from Grogu, which we're learning about in The Mandalorian. So it's not a complete, one-to-one copy or clone if there are other parts and bits and pieces that are part of the construction of him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But it makes sense of like this would have been Palpatine's vessel had it not also come out as an old man that was falling apart. And he's like, oh, come on, man. It's like, yeah, it's just like the very first time you tried to make cookies and you didn't use the recipe right. Okay.
He's like, this body is holding the Force. Perfect. And then he comes out and he's like, with like scars and stuff. It's like, no, I want to look like I did in Attack of the Clones.
But with abs. Yeah. Okay. So, question though. We've been learning some stuff from Vader 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a plot hole? Why didn't Palpatine just bring that whole fleet, the whole Final Order fleet, to the battle and Return of the Jedi? How come Palpatine didn't return sooner? And if he had this fleet that was getting ready and all this, and yada yada yada, I get those questions a lot. I think the answers are probably obvious, but
yeah, I'm gonna let you handle the long answer. You saw your face. You're like, no, but I can give the short answer. It's a contingency. It's not a contingency if the plan is out there and everyone knows about it and you enact it prematurely. It's a contingency. It's there in case of emergencies. You don't plan a contingency to, avoid the failure. You plan it despite the failure. So Palpatine's contingency was all about letting the Empire or punishing the Empire because they failed to protect him, but also giving them a chance to fully rebuild out in the outer or in the unknown regions, undisturbed, unhindered. So, I mean, someone as smart as Palpatine, as brilliant as he is, making these contingency plans, manipulating all of these people and planets and governments, he's going to see that, he had lost, right? As soon as Vader, and this is a contingency against Vader as well. So as soon as Vader picked him up and threw him down the shaft, Palpatine had every opportunity to enact his contingency, and he did. There's no way he was going to just come back with a decrepit body and say, no, let's bring the fleet from Exegol. No, like, that would be the dumbest thing to do.
He's like blind. He doesn't have fingers. He can only move within a 30-foot radius.
And as we keep saying, the contingency was for Vader in case Vader and anybody else in the Empire betrayed him and caused his premature death. So, I don't think it would have made logical sense for him to get that fleet from Exegol, whether or not it was done building or in the process of building or they weren't ready, is besides the point. It would have been stupid to do that because, he was the Empire. The contingency was because he didn't want the Empire to outlive him. So as soon as Vader betrayed him, it was going to the contingency plan. It was all part of a plan. You don't have a contingency and then kind of call an audible in the middle of it. You have to stick to the plan, and that's what Palpatine did.
Yeah. I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I think back to an interview with George Lucas, who was explaining about the Empire itself and that Palpatine was in his end game. If he completed what he was trying to complete, that would have been game over. It's like a cancer spreading through a body, trying to hit the point where there's nothing you can do. Mm-hmm. And of course, Anakin, being the chosen one, fulfilled his prophecy before we got to that point, returned the galaxy back to balance. And I love having that final order fleet as that item. You know what I mean? Like, if he's building it, because when you read the 2020 comics, it's not done. We see. There's only one of the Star Destroyers that looks physically done on the outside, but there's still things working on it. All the crystals are still being bled, and all this stuff. Like, it's they're not. You can't use them right now because they're not done. Like, it makes that pretty clear.
And he doesn't show it to Vader and says, "This is my contingency plan." For all we know, Vader sees it and he's like, "Okay, he's just building more ships, more weapons."
Well, that's absolutely what Vader would see, because if you follow through Vader 2015, what was Palpatine doing? Using new technology, building more weapons, and doing, what I mean? Like, it's par for the course. But yeah, so I mean, that's the obvious reason, is that he couldn't use them earlier because they weren't done. But obviously, as well as that is, who are you going to give them to? You also can only give them to your most trusted people. Tarkin and himself were the people that ran the 2 Death Stars. So it makes sense that he would want to cull this empire in and of itself, which also is nothing new. I don't know. I don't understand the questions on it because they all seem very obvious.
Yeah. I mean, they are. But at the end of the day, the point of the contingency was so that the Empire wouldn't outlive him, right? And so he wasn't about to take a chance with using the resources he had funneled for the contingency to maybe turn the tide of the Battle of Endor. Like, he was already falling
It
down
was
the
his
shaft.
retirement plan.
Exactly.
You can't use your retirement plan, otherwise you'll pay a tax penalty. No,
And it was a great plan. It was a great plan
Yeah,
because
it
the
was a great
Empire
plan.
doesn't outlive him, right? He goes to his clone body. It can't contain him, but he's there at least with Sloane and all of the remnants to oversee the rebuilding of it. So it's not necessarily outliving him, but he is going to hide.
He has the First Order out there, wreaking havoc and prepping the galaxy for his return. So if you read Bloodlines, you find out that there was a group calling themselves the Amaxine Warriors, and they were intending to be the vanguard for the First Order. Well, the First Order is actually the vanguard for the Final Order, and that's the point. It's interesting, ingenious, and very par for the course for Palpatine. I love it. But yeah, I think that kind of covers all of this stuff. I mean, do you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think we pretty much covered everything in terms of the contingency, Cinder, the Final Order, and just everything. Because I've been seeing a lot of articles out there talking about how canon is destroying itself, like Vader 2020, like what we just talked about with Vader seeing Exegol. Yes, he did see it, but he doesn't know what it is. He just sees more weapons and more ships, and that's par for the course of what he sees every day. I mean, he has his own castle on Mustafar. It's kind of like that. Like, Palpatine would go there, he would see things on Mustafar, and he'd be like, Vader, you're building weapons, okay. And then just goes off.
That also happened in Vader 2015. Vader was plotting against Palpatine and amassing technology and a droid army and all this stuff. Yeah, and additionally, if you have like any sort of critique, the first question you always have to ask is, how would this work against everything that came before? Right. So obviously, Force Ghosts, Anakin is not going to say all this stuff because that would break Star Wars. That would make us ask, how come Force Ghost Obi-Wan didn't fully train Luke? You know, he appeared as a voice to Luke and didn't appear again until he told him to go to Dagobah. And so, why didn't he tell him all of the things about the Jedi and his whole life story, and then train him and everything? Maybe that's a plot hole. I don't know. We don't know exactly what they can and can't do, but like, you have to consider it compared with all of it.
I don't think it is.
It's not, for sure.
I'm gonna go down
because
as
we've only seen Force Ghosts appear at people's lowest points. And I think that has something to do with it. And so you can't pop up and just be like, hey guys, how's it going? But
well, I mean, like, this is mostly speculative, but just given the fact that Qui-Gon knows, he basically implies that he knows everything that's going to happen. And so, like, Force Ghosts have this kind of, I like to call all sight. Now it's not canonically confirmed at all. That's very speculative, but just implied from a certain point of view, where he says,
I mean, Qui-Gon knows that Obi-Wan is going to die soon and join him.
Yeah.
But can't tell him because always in motion the future is, and he doesn't want him to deviate from the destiny that he has. So, yeah.
Yeah, so just going off of the fact that they speculatively could have all sight and see these things, or at least see as much into the future with people that are deeply connected to them, we can see the purpose behind the Force Ghosts that show up in the movies. Obi-Wan showing up not to train Luke, but to tell him to train under Yoda is one of those things where you're just like, why? Like, as as Brandon just said. Now, why didn't he train Luke? He had the ability to be a Force ghost. He could have trained Luke, but he was like, "You will go to Dagobah," and so he went to Dagobah and then enacted that thing. So the Force ghosts show up when they want, when
it's
they
like Doctor
have to.
Strange. It's like Doctor Strange seeing 10 million futures, but only one of them is where we win, or at least one of them is where we don't get pruned.
Yeah.
But yeah, and they can't do things that would deviate from that, even though there's going to be ups and downs in that timeline. That's
I
kind of
think
how
they
I see it.
could. I think they could, but it would mostly be a dark side thing, right? They would they'd be bending the Force.
Yeah. It'd be interesting. But yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. You know, if you're not following Element 7, I mean, where can we find you in all of your awesome content?
TikTok _ element 7 _ youtube.com/element7s number 7. So element 7s, or just search element 7. Element X style on Instagram and element 7x spelled out on Twitter. So the number 7 spelled out. I know it's confusing, but if you have some perseverance and courage, like Apple, all you need is some courage, and you'll find me wherever. But that's where.
If you're lost and you look, there you will find Pep.
Time after time.
Time after time. All right, well, yeah, and also, you know, we are the Diet and the Force podcast. Happens Saturdays at 5 p.m. Occasionally Sundays at 2 p.m., but mostly Saturdays at 5 on Element 7's YouTube channel. So please follow us both there. But yeah, thank you for joining us for going through this article. Please, if you have any questions or things, we'd love to make further videos to help people understand the stuff, because we read all these books and all these comics and all this stuff. So, and we just love sharing that information with you guys. That's really what this is all about. So yeah, leave us some questions, leave us some love, leave the video a like, and may the Force be with you always.